So, King Kong is one of those movies you never expect to spawn a multi-film franchise. However, thanks to people's love of the rich world, characters, and heartbreaking narrative, it managed to elevate itself as one of the most famous franchises in Hollywood. With a popular franchise such as this one means various films throughout history, with each putting a spin on the original story, either through a faithful remake of the original like Peter Jackson's film, or a genre remix of the story, such as the one present in 2017's Kong Skull Island. Originally, the film was set in 1917, even predating the original film's timeline, which takes place in 1933, meaning there was a chance the film would be a prequel to the events of the original movie. However, when director Jordan Vogt-Roberts came on, he tweaked this original idea. Now, Kong Skull Island was set in the 70s during the Vietnam War era. This genre remix also influenced the design of Skull Island itself. Roberts wanted to make a film that was a bit more grounded than what we'd seen before. As a result, they avoided the more dark fantasy aesthetic of Skull Island present in the illustrations by artist Frank Frazetta, which was already faithfully adapted in Peter Jackson's film. This means no grand, lush, and dense forests, but also no dinosaurs as well. This is why Skull Island just has this completely new kind of aesthetic we've never seen before in the King Kong franchise. Speaking of King Kong, surprisingly, he didn't change all that much throughout production. Kong is not a complicated character to design. I mean, at the end of the day, he is simply a giant gorilla. However, a character being simple doesn't mean that no amount of dedicated work went into designing him for the film. When Roberts came onto the project, he wanted to borrow a lot from the original 1933 film, specifically how Kong stood upright on two legs, rather than on all fours like we see in Peter Jackson's film. Roberts wanted Kong to feel more like a monster or a godlike creature, something that wasn't a typical oversized gorilla, but something that clearly was not natural to this world. So of course, throughout the artworks, you see many different depictions of Kong's character, borrowing from the appearance of many gorillas, but also the original 1933 model as well. Kong was a protector of the land who seemed almost like nobility in a way, but also something with a deep sadness. Perhaps this approach is why some artworks depict a moment where Kong is portrayed like some kind of king, being worshipped by the natives of the island. However, whatever these sequences were, they never made it into the final film.
That is one ugly ass bird.
When designing the creatures for Kong Skull Island, the creative team actually pulled a lot from Studio Ghibli films, specifically Princess Mononoke. The idea here is that if Kong was the king of Skull Island itself, then there would be many creatures on the island who rule their own domains. The creative team early on developed 20 different creatures inhabiting this island, and based on conceptual artwork, you can see that some of these creatures were very unique and terrifying, ranging from a bird that can give you a low taper fade, with razor wings that can fire out and cut objects as if they were scissors, insectoid-like creatures that can hide their appearance by mimicking foliage within a forest, or a sea creature that almost looks like an insect that grabs objects that float above it. However, these 20 creatures would eventually be slowly narrowed down until we were left with the one scene in the film. Now, there used to be one creature which almost made it into the final movie. There was a tiger creature that was meant to stalk the characters throughout the film after some soldiers killed its partner. The point of the tiger was to be the first indication that the island was not as normal as it seemed when the characters first arrived. Which means originally, when the characters first arrived at Skull Island, it was more of a slow burn before the dark truth of the island revealed itself. In the final film, the true nature of Skull Island comes hard and fast. Appearance-wise, when designing the tiger, Roberts told the artist to give it a Miyazaki-esque appearance, something that seemed almost fantasy-like but grounded at the same time. The tiger made it far into development, to the point where even a physical sculpt was created of the creature. But in the end, this tiger creature never made it into the final movie, but was present in the wider MonsterVerse lore.
Oh, shit.
In Kong Skull Island, the Skullcrawlers were the major antagonists of the story, being treated like these malevolent forces of nature who only seek to kill everything they come across. However, surprisingly, the Skullcrawlers were kind of just made up on the fly. When Roberts was first coming up with the idea for the Skullcrawlers, he didn't actually know what he wanted the monster to be like exactly, and had no basis on what it would look like. As a result, he simply gave the artist the task of just making up some ideas for it, coming up with the most outlandish and out there concepts for the creature. Some artworks lean more into fantasy, having Skullcrawlers look almost like a mythical dragon, and some even borrowed from creatures in our world, such as this one, where the Skullcrawler becomes some kind of monkey and bat-like creature. There were many influences that the creative team pulled from during the development of the creature. There was the monster from the Korean film The Host, Cubone from Pokemon, Seichel from Neon Genesis Evangelion, and No-Face from Spirited Away. It was not until Roberts saw this creature from the original movie that the creature began to really take shape. It was from here on out that the Skullcrawler took on this two-legged appearance. Now, even with this streamlined idea for the Skullcrawler, there was still dozens of ideas on how it would look like. In a lot of conceptual work, the Skullcrawler is shown to maneuver and inhabit the forests of Skull Island, having the ability to travel among the trees there. In fact, in many of the artworks, the Skullcrawler takes on a malevolent and snake-like appearance, slithering through the forest canopy and attacking anyone on the forest floor. I'm not sure if this means the Skullcrawler was originally a forest-dwelling creature rather than being an underground creature as seen in the final movie. The creative team continued to develop Skullcrawlers for a time, with each new additional concept beginning to slowly look like the final version. According to designer Zach Berger, designer Simon Lee took the two-legged lizard design and came up with something very close to what we see in the final movie, creating the most unique original monster design in the entire legendary MonsterVerse franchise. I think Kong Skull Island represents what happens when creatives actually take risks on a popular franchise, remixing iconic elements to do something new and different, paying off immensely in the end.